27 years before the galaxy learned to fear humanity's quiet strength, Commander Elias Ward stood alone in the Grand Hall of the Zereth Empire. At that time, humanity was still new to the Galactic Union. Their ships were small, their technology was modest, and their presence was viewed as more of a curiosity than a contribution. Many alien races welcomed them politely, but others treated them as children who had wandered too far from home. The Grand Hall itself was a structure that inspired both awe and discomfort. Its vaulted ceiling shimmered with floating crystals that changed colors like slow lightning. The floor was a silver surface that reflected every step, as if the hall was watching its visitors. Hundreds of delegates from across the galaxy filled the room, all wearing their ceremonial outfits, from glowing robes to metallic armor patterns. The air smelled faintly of ozone and blooming plasma flowers. Elias Ward, only 35 years old at the time, wore a simple navy blue Earth diplomatic uniform. He was tall, calm, and carried an air of quiet discipline. He wasn't famous yet, nor powerful. He was simply the human representative chosen for this summit, where the Zereth Empire hoped to show off its greatness before the rest of the Union. Standing at the center of the hall on a raised platform was Crown Prince Veilcor, heir to the Zereth Empire. He was known throughout the galaxy for his pride and his sharp tongue. He had 4 golden eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, silver skin that reflected the hall's lights, and long ceremonial armor that glowed with shifting sigils. Many described him as brilliant, but unbearably arrogant. The summit began peacefully enough. Delegates discussed trade routes, exploration missions, and the Union's hopes for future cooperation. Humanity, still small, listened more than they spoke. But when the topic turned to future defense alliances, Elias stepped forward. It was his duty to stand for his people, even if they were new to this stage. He walked toward the speaking platform with steady steps. Some aliens whispered among themselves. They did not expect a human voice to matter here. Elias activated the microphone node. A soft blue light wrapped around him so every delegate could hear him clearly. "Honored representatives," he said in calm, steady English that the translators quickly broadcast, "humanity believes cooperation is the best path forward. We may be a young species in galactic terms, but we want to contribute, to learn, to grow, and to help protect the Union." His words were simple, but they carried sincerity. A few delegates nodded politely. Others looked bored, but Crown Prince Veilcor, he began to smirk. When Elias finished his short speech, the prince rose from his throne-like chair and descended the steps with long, elegant strides. He stopped only a few meters away from Elias, towering above him. "So," Veilcor began, his voice echoing through the hall, "the humans believe they are ready to join the protectors of the galaxy? Ready to stand beside the great powers? Ready to guide the future?" The crowd murmured. Some sensed trouble. Others leaned forward, eager for entertainment. Elias kept his posture straight. "Humanity only asks for a chance to contribute." Veilcor laughed, a cold, sharp sound like crystal cracking. "A chance?" he said, drawing out the words. "What could your species possibly contribute? You have barely stepped off your home world. Your ships crawl while others race through the stars. Your weapons are fragile. Your science is centuries behind. And yet—" He tilted his head as if studying an amusing animal. "And yet you stand here as if you belong." Elias didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply waited, silently observing. But Veilcor was not finished. He raised his voice, speaking loudly enough that every corner of the hall could hear. "You humans make so much noise about potential that the galaxy is tired of hearing it. You demand respect when you have achieved nothing. You call yourselves explorers, but you are children playing with broken tools. Why should the Zereth Empire, or anyone, Trust a species that can barely protect itself." Some delegates laughed softly. Others avoided eye contact, embarrassed for Elias. A few looked uncomfortable with the prince's cruelty, but none dared interrupt. Elias felt heat rise in his chest, not from anger, but from the weight of every eye in the hall. This moment would not be forgotten. He knew that. But he also knew something else. Any words he spoke now would be twisted, mocked, or used against his people. So he did the one thing the prince did not expect. He remained silent. He looked into Valkor's 4 golden eyes and held the gaze calmly, without fear or shame. His face was steady, thoughtful, unreadable. The hall grew colder. The laughter faded. Delegates shifted uncomfortably. Even the glowing crystals above dimmed slightly, as if responding to the change in atmosphere. Valkor waited for a reply, some excuse, some apology, some desperate claim. But Elias gave him nothing, not a word. That silence stretched across the hall like a steel cable. It was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a man who refused to bend, refused to be drawn into a meaningless argument, refused to let someone else define him or his species. But Valkor did not understand. He mistook the silence for humiliation. "Look at him," the prince said loudly, gesturing toward Elias. "The human cannot answer. Even now he knows his place. Let this be a lesson to all. Some species rise, and some are born to stay below." The hall erupted in soft murmurs. The moment was sealed. The crown prince turned his back and walked away. Satisfied. Elias slowly lowered his gaze and stepped off the platform. He did not rush. He did not tremble. He simply walked with the same steady stride he had entered with. But inside, something solid and unbreakable began to form. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was a promise, a quiet promise made only to himself and to the future of humanity. One day he would show them, not with boasting, not with dramatic speeches, not with empty pride, but with results, with progress, with undeniable strength. Humanity would rise, not because they wanted revenge, but because they believed in who they could become. The rest of the summit passed like a blur. Delegates avoided meeting Elias's eyes. Humans across the galaxy heard about the incident within hours. Some felt embarrassed, others felt angry. Still others thought the prince had simply spoken the truth. But Elias, he focused on the future. He returned to Earth with new determination. He met with scientists, engineers, strategists, and leaders. He pushed for rapid advancement, for new exploration programs, for deeper research into strange signals and unknown threats lurking beyond mapped space. His silence in the grand hall became a driving force in every project he touched. And slowly, quietly, humanity began to change. They built faster ships, stronger defenses, smarter AIs. They expanded into deeper space. They studied things other species considered impossible. They discovered secrets that would later shock the galaxy. And throughout these years, Elias Ward rose not through fame, but through respect. People trusted him, followed him, believed in his vision. But beyond that, he carried another secret, one he told no one. In humanity's early explorations, they had stumbled upon something dark and ancient, something dangerous enough to threaten the entire galaxy someday, something that required preparation, unity, and strength beyond imagination. Elias had stayed silent in the grand hall not because he was ashamed, but because he had already seen the real threat, and the arrogant prince was too blind to understand what truly mattered. The galaxy would remember that day as a moment of human humiliation, but history would later show it was the moment humanity began its quiet rise, a rise that would echo far louder than any insult the prince had spoken. Humanity would not stay weak. Humanity would not stay small. and when the galaxy finally needed them, they would be ready. 27 years had passed since Elias Ward's silent moment in the Grand Hall. Most of the galaxy had forgotten him, or remembered him only as a minor character in an old political joke. But humanity had not forgotten, and humanity had not stayed the same. The humans who once arrived in small, slow ships now controlled vast networks of colonies. Their science had accelerated faster than any other race expected. Their engineers created machines that worked in ways alien researchers still struggled to understand. Their ships traveled through folded space, jumping from one star to another without traditional hyperspace lanes. But humanity did all this quietly, staying away from the spotlight. Their representatives rarely attended the major summits. They rarely spoke in the grand councils. Instead, they worked, explored, and prepared, guided by the quiet strength of Elias Ward. Now the galaxy would finally learn why that preparation was necessary. On the outer edge of Union space, a strange event had begun. Entire star systems were going dark. Not conquered, not burned, not destroyed in a normal war. They were simply disappearing. The first reports were confused. A mining outpost near the star Varnus 3 went silent, then a research station, then a trade route beacon. When a patrol fleet finally traveled there, all they found was empty space and drifting dust, as if whole planets had been wiped clean. Soon after, a horrifying message reached the Union. It came from a Zyrith scout ship, its crew panicked and exhausted. The transmission was short but clear. "They are machines. Endless, cold. They consume everything. We call them the Nullforge Collective." The galaxy trembled. The Nullforge were not like pirates or rival empires. They were not living creatures with culture or diplomacy. They were an ancient, relentless force emerging from a broken dimensional rift at the edge of known space. They moved like a storm, silent, unstoppable, perfect in their purpose. And their purpose was consumption. They dismantled matter. They erased worlds. They converted everything into expanding swarms of metallic shards and deadly constructs that looked like moving fragments of night. Worse, they adapted. Every time a fleet fired a new weapon, the Nullforge reorganized and countered it. Every time a defense shield was raised, the machines reshaped themselves around it. Every time a strategy seemed to work, it failed within hours. The Zyrith Empire, with all its pride and power, was the first great force to crumble. In the royal palace of the Zyrith capital, Emperor Vielkor sat in a dim command chamber, surrounded by glowing screens showing the collapse of his outer territories. The proud arrogance he once carried was gone. His armor no longer shone. It was worn from sleepless days and rushed battle preparations. Advisors rushed around him, but their voices blurred into a single desperate noise. "Our fleets cannot hold. The Nullforge have broken Line 7. We must evacuate the outer civilians." Vielkor clenched his jaw but said nothing. His empire, the same empire where he once mocked a young human representative, was breaking apart. For the first time in his life, he felt small. The Galactic Union called an emergency summit, the largest in decades. Every major species gathered in a fortified station above a neutral planet. Warships surrounded the station like a steel shell, but even they felt fragile compared to the dark storm approaching the galaxy. Delegates filled the hall quickly, speaking in hushed, fearful tones. They argued about strategies, evacuation paths, and desperate plans. But none of their ideas lasted long. Every report from the front lines showed the same thing. Nothing stopped the Nullforge for long. As the debate grew louder, a deep alarm sounded, the signal that a late-arriving delegation was entering the hall. Everyone turned. From the side entrance, a group of human representatives walked in. They wore elegant but simple uniforms, marked with the insignia of United Earth Command. Their steps were steady, focused. At the front of them was Elias Ward. Though older, with streaks of silver hair and deeper lines around his eyes, he carried the same calm presence he had 27 years ago. His gaze was sharp, his posture straight. He moved like a man who had trained for this exact moment. A ripple of surprise spread through the hall. Several delegates whispered, "Is that? It's the human from the Grand Hall. He looks so different, stronger." Emperor Velcor, sitting at the front, froze. He stared at Elias as if seeing a ghost. Memories flashed. The mockery, the silence, the smirk of arrogance he once wore so easily. Now he looked at Elias with something new: uncertainty. Elias approached the center platform. The hall fell silent, the same way it had decades ago, but this time the silence was filled with expectation, not ridicule. He activated the microphone node. "Honored delegates," he said, his voice steady but carrying weight, "humanity has come to help." A simple sentence, yet it hit the hall like a shockwave. One delegate, a tall crystalline being, asked, "Humanity is prepared to intervene? The Null Forge destroy everything in their path. You have no fear?" Elias shook his head slowly. "Fear is natural, but preparation matters more, and humanity has spent years preparing for this threat." Another delegate stepped forward. "Years? But the Null Forge appeared only months ago." Elias nodded. "For you, not for us." The hall burst into confused murmurs. Elias continued, speaking with patient clarity. "During early exploration, humanity discovered traces of the Null Forge near an uncharted rift. We learned what they were capable of. We knew they would come one day, so we prepared. Not openly, not loudly, but carefully." He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of each delegate. "You all remember my silence 27 years ago. Many believed it was the silence of a weak representative. But the truth is simpler." He paused. "I stayed silent because the galaxy was arguing about pride, while a real danger was growing in the dark. I knew then that humanity needed to rise, not to impress others, but to protect them." Delegates shifted uncomfortably, realizing how blind they had been. Elias pressed a button on a small device. The hall's central holodisplay lit up. Images appeared. Gigantic human fleets, advanced weapon systems, spacefold generators, and vast defensive structures forming a coordinated network. This was the Aegis Array, humanity's secret project. A shimmering barrier of folded dimensions, adaptive rail systems, energy lances capable of striking from beyond normal space. The hall gasped. "This," Elias said, "is humanity's plan to hold the Null Forge, not alone, but with every species that stands with us." For the first time in days, the delegates felt hope. Emperor Velcor rose from his seat, staring at Elias with a mixture of awe and regret. He spoke quietly but clearly. "Your people. You prepared all this? Why share it with us now? Why help those who mocked you, doubted you, dismissed you?" Elias looked at him, not with anger, not with pride, but with calm honesty. "Because the galaxy is worth saving, and because humanity rises not to take revenge but to protect the future." Velcor lowered his head, humbled. Elias turned back to the assembly. "We cannot defeat the Null Forge by fighting separately," he said. "But together, with strategy, unity, and resolve, we can push them back. We can protect our worlds. We can survive." The hall erupted, not in fear this time, but in determination. Delegates spoke of troop support, fleet contributions, shared research. For the first time since the Null Forge appeared, the galaxy was united. And at the center of this unity stood Elias Ward, the man once ridiculed for representing humanity. Now the same man was leading the galaxy toward its greatest battle, a battle humanity had been preparing for in silence, a silence that now echoed as strength. When the summit ended, fleets mobilized across the stars. The Aegis Array activated with a brilliant shimmer, forming a shield of folded space around vulnerable systems. Human warships, sleek and powerful, deployed to the front lines, moving with a confidence the galaxy had never seen. And Elias Ward stood on the command deck of the United Earth flagship, staring into the distant void where the Null Forge storm waited. The time had come. Humanity would no longer be silent. Humanity would lead. The galaxy had never seen a force like the Null Forge. Their swarms moved like living shadows, stretching from system to system with cold precision. Each time they consumed a world, they grew stronger, larger, faster. Many believed that nothing could stand against them, but they had never faced a united galaxy. And they had never faced humanity prepared for 27 long years. The Aegis Array, humanity's layered defense network, activated across dozens of systems. The moment it powered on, distant stars shimmered behind it like blurred light behind flowing water. The folded space barriers created new paths, safe zones, and choke points. For the first time since the Null Forge appeared, their expansion slowed. Inside the United Earth flagship Vanguard, Elias Ward stood on the command deck with his officers. Holographic displays floated around him, showing the movement of allied fleets. Ships from the Zirith, the crystalline Valari, the scaled Drunik, and many others held their positions, waiting for humanity's signal. Elias looked calm, but his eyes showed the weight of responsibility. Billions of lives depended on the choices he made in the next few hours. A young officer approached him. "Sir, all fleets report ready. The Aegis is stable. The Null Forge Vanguard will reach our first line in 14 minutes. "Good," Elias said softly. "Let's show them the strength of unity." Far beyond the Aegis barrier, the Null Forge swarm appeared like a silent black star. Thousands of machine constructs advanced in perfect formation. Some were shaped like massive shards of armor. Others were flexible, shifting forms that twisted in impossible ways. Their glowing red cores pulsed like mechanical hearts. There was no communication, no warning, no demand. Only endless movement. When they struck the Aegis barrier, reality rippled. Space bent, twisted, and held. The Aegis did not fall. Instead, it forced the Null Forge to compress and reorganize, something they had never needed to do before. And in that moment of forced adaptation, humanity acted. "Fire lances," Elias commanded. Across the defense line, human ships activated long, spear-like beams of energy that pierced the edges of space. The lances shot forward like streaks of white lightning, hitting the Null Forge swarms before they could settle into a new pattern. For the first time, the Null Forge recoiled. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. On the Zirith flagship, Emperor Velkor stared at the battle through a massive window, his golden eyes wide. He had expected the humans to help, perhaps even slow the enemy. But he had not expected this. The humans fought with coordination that seemed impossible. Their ships folded through space in graceful arcs, appearing and disappearing with perfect timing. Their weapons didn't just destroy, they reshaped the battlefield, cutting off the Null Forge from adapting too quickly. An officer approached Velkor. "Your Majesty, should we advance our fleet?" Velkor looked conflicted. He remembered the pride of his empire, the arrogance he once wore like armor. But he also remembered Elias Ward, standing silent beneath his insults. This was not a time for pride. "Yes," he said firmly. "We fight beside them. Order the fleet forward." The Zirith warships surged into the fray, their blue energy bolts joining the human lances. Other species followed, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy fought as one. Back on the Vanguard, the battle grew more intense. Elias stood at the center of the command deck, surrounded by flashing alerts and shifting holograms. Officers reported updates quickly and clearly, but the Null Forge were already adapting to the first attack. "Sir," New forms emerging on the western flank. Barrier pressure increasing. 3 Allied ships down, requesting reinforcement. Elias absorbed every detail, processing each change with calm focus. He had trained for this. He had seen this enemy before, back when humanity first encountered traces of the Nullforge in deep, unknown space. He understood how they learned, how they evolved, and how to use their own speed against them. He raised his hand. Activate Pattern Nova. A hush fell over the command deck. Pattern Nova was a high-risk human strategy. If it failed, the Nullforge could use it against them, but they didn't have a choice. Pattern Nova confirmed, the officer said. Across the battlefield, human ships broke formation, twisting into new paths that looked chaotic at first glance, but formed a hidden pattern when combined. They fired pulses, not at the swarm directly, but at empty points in space. The pulses tore open temporary micro-rifts, tiny cracks that disrupted Nullforge movement data. The machines tried to adapt but overcorrected, colliding with their own units and breaking their own formations. Allied fleets cheered. For the first time, the Nullforge seemed confused. "Now," Elias ordered, "all ships, full offensive push." The entire galaxy moved forward. The battle raged for hours. But slowly, steadily, the Nullforge began to lose ground. Their edge of unstoppable adaptation was being countered by something they could not mimic: cooperation between dozens of unique species. The machines learned patterns, but they couldn't easily learn the unpredictable actions of different minds working together. Humanity, with their flexible strategies, acted as the core that held the galaxy's unity together. As the swarm weakened, a massive rift began to open in the distance, the same dimensional tear the Nullforge had first emerged from. A swirling storm of black and red energy spiraled outward. "That's it," Elias said. "Their entry point. If we seal it, the swarm loses its anchor." "But, sir," the officer warned, "approaching the rift is extremely dangerous. Space is unstable there." Elias nodded. "Which is why we won't send ships." He pressed a control on his wrist. A hidden system on the Vanguard activated. A shimmering sphere stored beneath the ship's armor. The Dimensional Stabilizer Core, humanity's final card. "We launch it remotely," Elias said. "If it reaches the center of the rift, it will collapse it safely." The officer swallowed. "And if it fails?" Elias spoke quietly. "Then we try again. Humanity does not quit." The sphere launched into space, glowing brighter as it neared the rift. Nullforge units detected it instantly and rushed toward it, but the Allied fleets formed a protective wall. Zereth, Drunic, Velari, and human ships moved as one. They fought like a single organism, shielding the core as it drifted deeper into the storm. Finally, the sphere reached the center. A blinding flash erupted. Then, silence. Deep, powerful silence. The rift imploded in a swirl of distorted light and vanished completely. The Nullforge units froze for a single moment, and then collapsed into dust as their connection to the rift was severed. The battlefield went still. It was over. Cheers erupted across the galaxy. Fleets signaled victory. Entire planets celebrated. Messages of relief and joy flowed through communication channels. But in the middle of the celebration, Elias Ward stood quietly on the command deck, watching the last particles of the Nullforge fade away. He didn't smile. He simply breathed out slowly, letting the weight of the past 27 years settle. Humanity had done it. Not alone, but by leading with resolve, patience, and unity. The door to the deck opened, and Emperor Veilcor stepped in. For the first time, he wore no ceremonial armor, only simple command clothing. His posture was not proud, but respectful. He approached Elias and bowed his head. "Commander Ward," he said softly, "I owe you an apology for the things I said all those years ago, and for not seeing your strength sooner." Elias looked at him, calm as ever. There is no need for apologies, Emperor. The future matters more than the past. Vialcor nodded slowly. Still, thank you. Not just for saving my people, but for teaching the entire galaxy what true strength looks like. Elias gave a faint smile. Strength is quiet until needed. Vialcor repeated the words, almost reverently. Yes, I understand that now. When the news spread, the galaxy remembered the moment from 27 years ago, the silence that once seemed like humiliation. Now, that same silence was remembered as the moment everything changed. Elias Ward's silence had not been weakness. It had been a promise, a calm, steady oath that humanity would rise. And they had. Not with noise, not with arrogance, but with determination that echoed across the stars. Humanity had saved the galaxy, and the silence that once mocked them had become their war cry.